Welcome to the 9 to 5 Faith podcast. Today we're joined by Candy Shaw, an occupational therapist who seamlessly integrates her faith and compassion into her holistic approach to ministry. Let's dive right into her inspiring story. I am so excited to have Miss Candy Shaw here on this episode where we're going to be digging deep into a very multifaceted approach to faith. I say that because your resume is quite impressive. I will say that.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's very sweet, and I don't want to take any of the glory. I give it all to God.
I love that. Can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So my name is Candy. I am a pastor's wife. I'm a mother of 3. I am a grandmother to 7. The 7th just arrived on Monday.
Oh, yeah. That's so exciting.
Yeah. We'll have one more by Christmas. And by Christmas, we will have 6 under 3. So
Wow.
I'm excited about an interesting Christmas event we're going to have.
Yeah.
I am a women's ministry leader and a Sunday school teacher. I teach the teenagers at my church. My husband and I have a podcast. It's called Little Hands, Big Victories. And we provide research-based information for parenting and all things relating to parents. And then he brings it all back to the Bible at the end of each episode.
Oh,
So that's what I do. And then professionally, I'm an occupational therapist. I am a board certified behavior analyst. I've been an occupational therapist for 29 years. And for the past 8 years, I've worked in early childhood intervention. And that's our federally funded program here in Texas.
Gotcha. What does that mean?
Yeah. So early childhood intervention is our 0 to 3 program. And so most people know what special education is in the school system or in the school districts. In early childhood intervention, that's the federal funds that come to us from birth to 3. And we have children that they qualify for our program. We do an assessment to see if they qualify. And the way they qualify is if there is a discrepancy between what's their age expected milestones and where they're functioning now. There's got to be a delay there. And also they can automatically qualify through determination based on their diagnosis, which puts them at risk for delays.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
I was just going to say, I love talking to everyone from every single background because I always learn something new of every single type of industry that you could possibly imagine. I remember I was working for this company and we served small businesses, and there was this guy and he said, it was like, what industry are you in? And they were like the basics. And then he goes, I'm in animal husbandry. And I'm like, okay, then wow, we really got there really is a business for everything. But I love learning about that. And, thank you for sharing that bit. Yeah. So how did you find yourself in that job, that role? And how long have you been there?
Yeah. So, like I said, I've been an occupational therapist for 29 years. But it's funny, when I was younger, I really thought I would be like a missionary or work for the Peace Corps or marry some little evangelist that came to my church. I was always all dutied up whenever I knew we were going to have like a singing group or an evangelist. Maybe they had a kid that was my age and we could get married and I could play the piano, which I can't even play the piano, but I thought I'm going to learn how to do that. So that's kind of the route I thought I was going to be in. And then, over time, so my dad was shot in Vietnam and he was a paraplegic.
Okay.
But going to school, you don't realize that not everybody's dad is seated or in a wheelchair, right? And so I realized, okay, my family's a little bit different. And so growing up in a church that was very fundamental, and I have a Pentecostal background, even though we pastor a Baptist church, which that's another story. But you grow up and you think about what's God have in store for me? What is my plan? And I began to have a compassion for people with special needs. And I think that's a beautiful way that God prepares our hearts for things. It's easy now for me to talk about it, but back then you don't realize that. But God was preparing my heart to be sensitive for people with special needs. Even though my father was very independent And I mean, he scuba dived. He was a Paralympic medalist. I mean, he did all of these wonderful things, but I felt like God was calling me into that. So I knew early on that I would be a therapist. And I thought I was going to be a physical therapist because that's the only kind of therapy I had ever heard of and really ever knew. My parents would save all their junk mail, and I had an old typewriter, and I would like type my name and then put physical therapist after the end. I mean, I just knew that was what I was going to be. But part of those kind of school programs, which I'm sure other programs are like that, you have to do a lot of volunteer hours as part of your application. So I did some volunteer hours. My husband was in the military at the time, so I did some volunteer hours at the military hospital there. And physical therapists deal a lot with feet. And I realized pretty quick that that's not where God called me, to feet. And so I decided that maybe that that might not be my thing, but I thought, well, I'll just go into pediatrics. Little baby feet are a lot sweeter than the big adult diabetic feet.
Yeah.
Sorry if I hope that doesn't offend anybody, but that's not where God called me. So I did apply to PT school and I didn't get in. And I thought, what's happened? God, I know this is where you wanted me to be. But I found out about occupational therapy, went to the program. I found out everything I needed. I was a little shy of a course. I needed one course to apply to go right into the next semester. So I met with a professor, and she said, well, Candy, you can CLEP this course if you want to. And I was like, oh yeah, I can do that. If, God has paved this way, I'm going to do that. So I went to the bookstore and she told me the book to buy. So I looked at the textbook and it was like, $150. Well, my husband was in the military and we just barely had 2 nickels to rub together.
Yeah.
And I thought, I can't afford that, but I can afford the study guide. So I bought the study guide. I studied up, went back the next week, passed the course, flying colors. I think I'm at a perfect grade. And that happened to be the same professor that actually did part of my interview when I applied for the school. So we hit it off. God's favor was just all the way. And I look back and I had a little bit of time between the time that I was rejected from PT school to the time I applied to OT school. And that I had a baby at the time. And that was a little bit of, solitude and rest and reflection and all that God gave me with my family and my baby before that hard start started up again. So they only accepted 32 students that semester. And I was accepted, and I don't, I know that it wasn't like, I wasn't that impressive. My grades were just average. I mean, they had to be good, but they weren't as good as other people in my class. I came from a very small town. We're a town of 5,000. We had one little microscope that we would look at things in the science department, and therapy school is heavy in science. Yeah. And I remember it was always a coach that teaches science classes. It was like, don't adjust the thing on the lens. And I'd be like, I can't even see what's even in there, So I felt like I didn't really have that great of a science background, but I knew that God had put me in there. And I always talk about, he who began a good work will be faithful to complete it. I was always quoting that to myself. And, I was able to go into there was a little bit of that imposter syndrome that we all have as women. Yeah. And I kept thinking, somebody's going to find out that I'm just a little country girl. I tried to go by Candace because I wanted to act more professional. I tried to make my accent sound a little more dignified. And, since then I've just embraced it. That's who I am. God wants this country girl to do what she does. And it's served me well because now I work back in a community where we all talk like this, and they're more accepting of people who talk like themselves and can relate to living in a small town. Yeah. So anyway, that's how I went through
the story.
Yeah. And then I worked for the school system for a 19 years. And typically when you work for the schools, you're there till you retire. Yeah. And so I worked there for a while, and it was perfect. My kids were in those schools. I was in the same schools as my kids. I was able to give the $2 for whatever, something that I forgot that morning, or run home and get their jacket. It was really a nice setup for a family. Out in the summers, it was nice. But then I kept feeling like, something is missing in what I need to do. I kept getting more children that had some more behavioral challenges. I kept getting more children that had autism, and I used all the tools that I had as an occupational therapist. I would do all the funny things. I have a little trick. I put something on my head and I pretend to sneeze, and that thing falls off, and every child laughs, except some of these children didn't. And I kept thinking, God, what am I doing wrong? I need some more tools in my toolbox. Yeah. And so I started learning more about behavior, learning more about autism. And I decided that I would go back to school. And right at that time, this is how God works. Right at that time, they were developing a new program, a grant program at the university that's 70 miles from here. And that was 2000, let's see, 2008. And so this was all new. It sounds like not so new now, but it was all new, and it was going to be online. And they said, if you live 70 miles or more and you work in a rural school district, you can apply for this grant. And it was a full grant for me to get my master's. And they put all of my books on a Kindle and mailed it to me, mailed me a little webcam. This was all new. But what happened was every professor I had was the leader in their field. They would make videos. And so I got to learn from, the greatest in their field. And I was able to learn more about autism. And then from that point, I went on and got my board certification in behavior analysis, did all the internships set for the board. And so now I'm a BCBA. And so I work as an occupational therapist, but I'm a behavioral based occupational therapist. And because of what I know about behavior, I feel like it was that missing piece that I needed to be able to implement those strategies and be able to really support my families in a way that gives them the tools to raise their babies.
Wow. That's beautiful. And that's such a cool story to see, like, just God's hand, just the whole way through everything. And especially that grant, like, God practically wrote those rules, I'd say. And also I learned something new. I did not know that, like, the programs for occupational therapy and physical therapy were different.
Go. Oh yeah. They're different.
Something. Yeah. I knew they were different, like, specialties, but I thought it was like when you go to law school, like, you just go through the program and then you choose your specialty at the end. It's not.
So OT is real heavy in mental health and psychology. We come out of that. And so we use a lot of our activities are really based around leisure activities and things that's activities of daily living. That's what we're really heavy on. Some people think that we just divide the body and the physical therapists go below the belt and we do above, but really occupational therapists, we do anything that's considered activities of daily living. And a behavior analyst does anything that's behavior, which is everything. I can go to Walmart with a family and we can work on setting in a shopping cart, or I can work on feeding. I mean, really billably, I can do just about anything that the family thinks is a priority and develops an outcome for.
I love that. And I'm here. I'm with you on the baby feet versus old man feet. Because
I didn't offend anybody. But that's the thing that God calls us. There are some people that are called to that. And that's just and baby spit up doesn't bother me. Baby throw up doesn't bother me. All the other things that come out of G buttons or trachs, none of that bothers me. So that just shows that God calls us differently.
Because I would not be able to survive either of those things. I think one thing that's, like, really fundamental to what you were describing is kind of your vision for yourself. And I think that one of the things that I wanted to accomplish with this podcast was to kind of combat some of the untruths about what it looks like to be a Christian and to work. Because I feel like there's the idea that if you're not doing ministry full time, you're not serving the kingdom, which is patently false, untrue. And that what you were describing of, like, oh, I'm gonna marry a missionary or something. Like, I was that. So, like, I related to that of, like, getting in this point, because I, like, really didn't know what I wanted to do growing up. And I got to this point where I was like, okay, I'm just going to, like, go live overseas somewhere and just, like, do that and, call it done. Because, again, I didn't know what I do was an actual job, and same thing. But that mindset that you were telling us of, like, I had that mindset, and I totally understand what you mean by that, because you don't have to just be a pastor or a ministry leader or be on staff in the church or live somewhere overseas to be doing kingdom work.
Absolutely. And I always tell at my Sunday school class, we are actually talking about purpose and mission in a series that we're doing. And I told them, I would have never thought about this as being a ministry, but absolutely it is. I always say I get paid to have a ministry, and I get a salary for that, and I get paid to play. I spend most of the day working with my families in the floor. I get paid for that. That is my ministry. I happen to get a salary for it.
Yeah. I love that. Do you have any examples of like moments where you've been able to more explicitly minister to the clients that you work with, or has it just been kind of by example that you are leading?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if I could think of one specific, but I can just tell you that. So during my sessions, I am able to come in and, there was a point in my life where I felt like, the Bible says, let nothing be done in strife and vainglory, and edify others above yourself. And so I've always really tried to be humble. But there's a point, especially in my profession, where you have to go in there and let them know that you are qualified to work with their child, right? And to build confidence in them. And so right from the beginning, I talk about that, and I talk about who I am as a person, because we're going to get to know each other really well. I have been privileged to be in their home, and I'm going to come in there. Sometimes I come every week. I mean, that's very realistic for me to be there every week. I will have another sibling hanging on my back, and I may be there when they're having a meltdown, and I may be there early in the morning. They've forgotten. They may show up in their pajamas. There'll be times where I'll be there, be involved in that home when their electricity might be cut off or something like that. So I know that they have to trust me, and I want them to develop a good rapport with me. So I tell them who I am, and part of who I am is I'm a pastor's wife. And I love the fact that I can say that in a very neutral way,
right?
But it's an open door for them, because, very quickly they'll say something back to me that gives me that open door to know that, okay, it's okay to have this kind of conversation. Yeah. And I have conversations like one of the common conversations I have during my coaching is we always develop from head to toe and proximal to distal. Isn't that interesting how God makes us? And sometimes families will be concerned that their child is not talking yet. And I'll say, his body's really working on walking right now, and it takes so much energy to do that. But we know that there's this window of communication that opens after children walk. Isn't that great how God makes us? He lets us use all this energy for things that keeps us safe and ambulatory, and then we can work on communication. So there's those little ends that I can add about how the goodness of God and how better can you see God's goodness when you look in the face of a child, or the movements of a child, or the silliness of a child. And so, and then it's not uncommon. Well, they'll say, I've got this issue. Will you pray for me this week? Or they'll text me and say, we can't visit today because so-and-so has chickenpox, or so-and-so has RSV, or whatever. And I will say, absolutely. And I'm going to pray with you. And they'll say, I really appreciate it. So there's many opportunities that I have to really pray for these people, with these people that they give me an opportunity to be a part of their life and part of their spiritual life. Because I feel like, when a family is going through having a child with a special need, they're grieving the child they thought they were going to give birth to. Yeah. They thought this child would not be a child with a disability. So we know that when we go into the home, we can't expect them to start working on feeding or sitting up or working on their muscles when the family's emotional stability is not even there yet. I mean, that's part of Maslow's hierarchy of need: emotional stability, emotional safety. Right. And so I feel like that I'm justified really working on that encouragement piece and edifying and lifting up somebody and giving that family and that parent confidence. Because unfortunately, what I hear a lot from families, even if I'm reading between the lines or they just come out and say it, they are blaming themselves for whatever the disability their child has. They will say, I could have done this. Maybe I could have eaten better. Maybe my genetic makeup is not right. They're always going to blame themselves, even if they have no reason to. They will blame themselves. Right. And so there's these stages of grief, just like you learn about in psychology, stages of grief that these parents are going through. And I feel like that I have a great opportunity to hold their hand right there and lift them up. And we know that science talks about that words of encouragement literally change the makeup of our brain. And I believe it. God says, renew your mind. And so I try to be that vessel. And even if it's something small, even if I feel like, I didn't really say anything, Lord, I might have botched that up, but I know the Holy Spirit's going to make up for it. Just me having that privilege to be in the home and just to say something of encouragement. Maybe I just pat them on the shoulder that day and give them a tissue. Say, it's okay. Yeah. You can cry about it. Yeah. We're going to work through this.
Yeah. And I couldn't imagine not only are they in this grieving moment, season, whatever it is, but they're also in this adaptation season where they're having to relearn and learn for the first time as well, how to care for this child who, might not be in the typical sense ready to grow up how they think that they were going to grow up.
Yes. And really like those self-management skills of being able to control their emotions and also just managing their day, because I have so many families that I literally take time to sit down and say, okay, here's your login to get into your patient portal, to check your appointments. And I want to see your calendar. Come sit with me. We're going to write it down, because some of these young mamas have never had to organize their life.
Right.
They've never had to schedule that. And that's a lot of doctor's appointments that these families have. And so just being able to walk through these little things with them, I don't know of a better way to show Christ's love is than to say, I care about your calendar. I care about those little things about you.
It's beautiful. One thing that I want to kind of go back to, and I don't mean to put this stereotype on you, but maybe you can affirm or disprove me. But as a pastor's wife, I would argue that it is very rare that she has a different job.
Oh, you think so?
I think so. I mean,
you mean a different job than being the pastor's wife or co-pastor?
Or like co-pastor or like in the church team in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. You are like, volunteering and teaching and things like that. But I don't think I've ever met a pastor's wife, who didn't do that or like was a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah. Okay. Well, down here where we live, pastor's salaries aren't enough to support that.
Yeah.
Now I can't say that for my church. My church is super generous and they have been great with us. I can say that, but we are the exception. And a lot of pastors, they also have other jobs because their church salary does not support their family.
Right.
So, so a lot of us pastors' wives, we have another job.
Well, maybe
I'd rather not have it. Yeah.
Maybe I need to expand my boundaries a little bit with that, because that's for me. Like, I think back to all the pastors that have been over, at least lead pastors and head pastors that have been at the churches that I've been working or that I've been attending. It's been either, stay-at-home mom, or it has been working on staff in the church in some capacities. So, well, that's interesting. I learned something new. Thank you for disproving a stereotype that I had.
I didn't know where you were going when you said stereotype of pastor's wife. I was like, oh gosh, where's she going?
No, and not to say like the stereotype of like they can't work. Yeah. But it's just like I haven't seen someone who actually has like an occupation kind of outside of that role. So that's very interesting.
Well, and some of it could be also that my husband did not become a pastor until after he was out of the military. So he became a pastor later. So it wasn't like something that we both knew that he was going to do. We did. Although he is 5th generation minister. We should have known this, but yeah.
You should have seen it written ahead.
I know.
It was coming for him anyways.
I know. Yeah.
So, in what ways, because you have kids and grandbabies, and that's so exciting that you just had one on Monday,
Oh, no, it is
grandbaby
exciting.
come in. And
Mhm.
actually, I'm like on alert right now. My sister's in labor as we
Oh,
record this.
oh my goodness.
And so I'm like ready to turn off my do not disturb and see if I have any text messages or missed calls. Um, but what was it like for you, kind of juggling everything and then also like making sure church and Jesus was a part of your kids' life and your marriage and like
Mhm.
as a family unit kind of moving through everything while your husband's in the military and then he becomes a
Mhm.
pastor, you're going to
Mhm.
school, like all the things.
Oh yeah.
I
No,
told you
yeah.
guys, her resume is crazy.
Well, I'm not going to say it was easy at all. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not easy. It was not easy, but I do think that being a part of a church takes a lot of burden off of you. It really does. No matter what stage of life you're in, what season you're in, being able to call somebody in a pinch and say, I need to study for this, or I've got this deadline I need to meet. There's always somebody that's stepping in. We live among our family. We have lots of extended family around here. So we have lots of people that have helped out. I mean, it takes a village, and we have a village that surrounds us. So it has not been easy, but there was a time where we were saying yes to everything, and I learned a good lesson when I learned how to say no. But I learned how to say it in like this. I will say, I like your idea, or that sounds wonderful. I really want to give 100% to that, but right now I can't give 100%. So I'm going to have to say no. Call me another day, or maybe when you reschedule that later in the season, I'm going to say yes to that at some point, but I can't today. And that was like the best thing I ever learned how to do, because, as Christians, we feel like we got to say yes to everything. That's the right Christian like thing to do, but we can't. And we have to put our family first. We have to put our church family first, but we can't be good for our church if our family is just barely hanging on by a thread. And so there were times when we have to. And one of the best things that we do, and I've always done, and my parents taught me to do, we have Sabbath. And so after church, because our Sunday is really not a lot of rest up until 1:00, right? Because that's kind of a work day for us.
Yeah.
Even though I love it and I love to worship and it enthuses me and it gets me ready for the next week. But we take naps and we're serious about it. And people know, don't call Candy between like 1:30 and 4. She will be in her pajamas in the bed with her head covered up. And that's okay. I believe in that Sabbath. I'm going to celebrate it, but it is important. And I wish more people took that seriously. And then that evening, we don't have church on Sunday night. We have a very involved Sunday school program. We have a very, very involved Wednesday night program where we serve the community. We feed the community. And Sunday evening is family. We will get pizza. I'm not going to be cooking that for Sunday evening, but most of my family are going to show up and we're going to do something together. So
I love that. I had that tradition growing up, of doing Sunday dinners with my family and everything. And one thing my husband and I have started trying to be more disciplined of is like actually Sabbathing. And like, because we would always, at first it'd be like, oh, I just, I need to like clean the kitchen. It's driving me nuts. Or like it's just like one thing and then it becomes two things and then it becomes like overwhelmed. So, we've always tried to observe the Sabbath, but as of recently, he and I have both like, sometimes it's Saturday, sometimes it's Sunday, just depending on our schedules. But like going into the weekend, we say, okay, what day is it going to be? And like how, and I also, this is like a side effect of Sabbath that like I've never heard anyone talk about, but Sabbath makes you work harder.
I believe it.
Sabbath makes you work harder when you can't have a day to work. It makes you work harder the other 6 days of the week.
It does.
And then you get your rest.
Yeah. But I always say that when I do have commitments that I didn't think I could follow through with when it comes to serving or having something related to the church during the week, I always come back and I'll look at my husband and go and say, oh, it's only 7:30. God redeems the time. He sure does. And I find that if I give a little extra during my time, he always surprises me. And I look down and he's redeemed the time.
Great. Isn't our God good?
Amen.
The other thing that really stood out to me is the phrase that you said of your church family takes some of the burdens, takes your burdens. And I feel like, I mean, I hear it and I understand it and I know it, but you saying that really put it in perspective, because I feel like a lot of the time we see church as a burden. See that we have to serve, we have to give, we have to attend, right? Like we see church as something that is like, here, it's just sucking the life out of me. Whereas like, you know, while we do need appropriate boundaries in our life around, you know, our family and everything, that missing piece of like, no, the church is meant to support each other.
Right. And I brag on my church as many times as I can, and I'm going to right now.
Yeah.
They want to be together. And when I think about things that I feel like I'm not doing well enough, I'm not hosting enough ladies events. I'm not doing that enough because our ladies want to be together. And when it's on Sunday morning, my husband and I stand at the door. We give everybody a hug. And I always tell him, not everybody likes a hug, but they know that they're going to get a hug from him. But we always greet everybody. And we will sit there and we'll think, where these people, they're not wanting to leave. They're, even when they get out the door, they're out on the porch. They're still mingling around. I'm looking in there and we're going to turn off. I'm like, we're turning off the lights. It's time to go.
The exit music.
Off, but they love to be together. And that's what I love about my church, because, you know, I have changed my whole thought about what I used to think church was. And now I know church is a family of people who want to do life with you, want to support you in any way that is, whatever it looks like. And we just want to be together. We really do. Quarantine was hard on us. Oh, it was hard.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine being in that position. Luckily, my church, you know, was, I mean, I'm in Arizona, so the rules were like fairly lenient than like, you know, New York. But yeah, we had a chance to, you know, go online for a while, but then also come back together. And I think one thing I'll say about, you know, doing remote church and everything, I would actually say that now that churches were kind of forced to have that kind of setup, I feel like it actually ministers to more people who you didn't anticipate. I remember growing up, we lived like right by a pretty significant Christian university. And we had like one of our ministries was to drive college kids to and from church. And then we had another ministry that would drive like immobile or like housebound elderly individuals to and from church because they couldn't drive, they couldn't get out. And so like I see things like what happened, you know, with COVID and, you know, everything going remote and everything. And I was like, there's actually like, that's actually forcing the church to serve some people they might not have thought of.
Absolutely.
So I love that. It was really fun because I'm like, well, you know, government and religious organizations are usually like behind the times when it comes to technology. So kind of forced our feet to the fire a little bit.
We didn't have an online ministry until then.
Yeah.
And so it forced us to, and now we've continued to do so. And my husband always will text people when he sees that they're not in their pew, you know, after church, and he'll say, we missed you. And they'll say, I was sick or whatever, but I watched you online. And I think, wow, what a blessing that we were able to give them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I do the online, but I will say, unless you have some kind of extenuating circumstance, being in that church pew, being in those chairs every week is like insanely important. And my father-in-law just mentioned this. We had dinner with them last night, and he mentioned that the point of church is community, and how he just up in like confessed it himself of like, yeah, we haven't been doing that. I've been just relying on watching church on TV because I can. And yeah, they're missing out on that community piece and that togetherness piece that is so, so important.
Right.
Because
And I
like
think,
you said, you can just call them up and being like, hey, can you help me with this? Can you watch the kids?
And that togetherness I've seen really have strengthened our church, because we have a Wednesday night program and it takes all hands on deck. And even, some of our newer families that come in, we don't have any rules like you have to do all these classes and all of this before you can volunteer. We just, if you're willing to do it, we'd love to. Even if you just come and stand at the door for security and you're just chit chatting with the men who are out there on the porch anyway, we want you to be involved. And I think, I could not have designed a ministry for new people like that to get them in a better way than it just naturally occurred. Like, just come up here and watch, or just come up here and shadow somebody, and they get right in. They're out there serving food and being involved. And then they're all connecting. And then I'll see on Facebook, oh, this family went to the beach with this family. And now they have these connections that they never had before. And serving others, it looks like it's, for the person you're serving, but actually, that's
it also gives back.
Yeah. The one who waters is the one who's getting watered. So that's what the Bible says. So it's been a beautiful way to develop connections and really a family. And that's what people refer to each other as, is a family in our church. And I'm so proud of that.
And I think too, like, especially coming after COVID, and I'm writing a few pieces on this, but if you look at like the landscape of what everyone is doing, and like, I feel like during the COVID years, the amount of online communities and the amount of online courses and online get-togethers and summits and conferences and church service, like, it was insane. And everyone, like, they now say like, oh, I have Zoom fatigue, right? Like, it is a thing. And I think even though we spent those 2 or 3 years somewhat in some kind of, digital connection space, we are more lonely than we ever have been.
Oh, yeah.
And that's one thing that I've like kind of been like noodling on and like, just sitting with, of like, clearly this isn't working. Clearly, this is not solving the problem of people needing community, because the point of community is to lean on each other and to not feel isolated and lonely. And again, isolation and loneliness is where the devil loves you to be. Absolutely. And so if we could be outside of that and we can truly find community, what does that mean? And yes, like, the local church is a huge part of it, but also just like doing life alongside other people. To where that without them having to even ask that they need help.
Absolutely.
Those
and
I got us so much.
Yeah. And that's, I even tell my families, if it's a family that I have not, made that connection with and know how they feel spiritually about, God and or Christ, I will still tell them, if they are dealing with something, I'll ask them, what kind of support they have. And too often they may have forsaken their family, or they may have cut ties with them for whatever. They don't have a lot of support. And I will say, I'll give them an example, join a church, but, even a book club, or go to story time at the library with your child, or something, and meet some other people, because we really need each other.
We do. Yeah. And yeah, so much. Like, the effects of isolation and loneliness, it's just, I mean, this behavior and like its effect on your body and physically and all that stuff. And like, I would even argue to say, when you see individuals, especially like the elderly, who have minds that are depleting, right? Like, I think I just heard a study of like, the people who have community and have like a really tight knit, either friends or family around them, are living longer and are having a better quality of life, versus people who are just being kind of left behind and abandoned in kind of their older age. And then they have more mental deterioration and, more mental health issues and all of that stuff. It's just, it just goes down a spiral.
Yeah. And I would even go on and say, a lot of the families that I work with who have children who have behavioral challenges, they have isolated themselves because they do not feel comfortable going into the community with their child. So I feel like, they are missing a lot of that connection and that strength that you get from other people because they have, and my goal is that at my church, we are accepting of everyone, and I want everyone to feel comfortable there. And I would love to, go beyond that and see more, education or training or programs for churches to be able to really target those people that feel isolated or afraid to come to church because they're afraid that they may not be accepted, or that their child could not go back to our children's program or whatever. I want to debunk that for sure at my church, and I'd love to see that for all churches.
Yeah. So maybe you can speak more to that of like anyone who's listening to this, who's saying like, I don't want to be that person. Like, I don't want to be that person who is, making my space and my reach uncomfortable for these families who might have kids who have special needs, or these families who are feeling isolated. What is something that they can do to like make those people feel more welcome?
You mean like a church member or a church staff member, or?
Yeah. Or just like, a Christian who's out there, who's like listening and was like, hey, like, I don't want people like in this space to feel like they're alone. Maybe it's like going to my church and being like, hey, like, do we have a special needs ministry or,
absolutely.
What is it?
Yeah. Or, if you see someone that might be a potential person to come to your church ministry or children's programs, I mean, I would think it would be very appropriate just to come up and say, we'd love to have you. So-and-so is also a teacher. We have lots of teachers who volunteer. So-and-so is also a teacher. You're welcome. You can come and sit with if you want to. And if you're afraid to leave your child, come and join us. You can sit and help us. You can volunteer. We take all kinds of volunteers. So they can stay and help. And I think that's probably a burden that I think we need to fulfill.
Yeah. I'll brag on my church for a second is, I think we're the only church in the area that has a dedicated special needs program as robust as we do. So much so when was it? 2021. It was like in the middle of COVID where we were like, is it going to be over yet? I don't know. So we were in this like, it was small, but it was like an average size kind of get together building, like a rec room size building. And we outgrew that. And then we did this huge campus project where we built a new building and, it holds like 2,000 people, I think, inside, or maybe 1,000, maybe I'm overshooting it, but we already outgrew it. It is 2023 and we outgrew it because and our special needs program outgrew our special needs building. So now the special needs program is taking over the old building that they used to have like big church in. And so it's been so cool to kind of see that, like, specifically going after a place that is often ignored.
Yeah. Oh, that makes me so happy. So one of the things that we had just started to do is, I can't remember if I heard this or it just came to me, but the fact that churches have all of this amazing real estate that's not being used every single day, at least in our town, and a lot of towns it is too. And so when I worked in the other ECI program that's more toward Fort Worth, there were churches that allowed us to have groups. So I would do a music and movement group. We would sing songs and do different kinds of things where we brought in typical developing children alongside our children with special needs and do groups. And they allowed us to use their facilities. And then just the other day at my church, there's a new program here in town that has adults with special needs. And we have an amazing youth room with a basketball court and airplane built in the wall. And I was like, there's no reason that should be there empty during the week. Come and let's hang out. And so they brought them. And so I think, those ways are a good way to let people know that, hey, we are welcoming individuals with special needs and all individuals.
Yeah. I love that so much. Candy, thank you so much for sharing with me. I feel like you're just a wealth of information, and I've loved talking with you so much. One of the things I always ask my guests at the end of each show is, what is one faith, discipline, or practice our audience members can walk away with today, tomorrow, next week, whenever they're listening to this, that they can implement into their life to help them grow their walk with Christ?
Ooh, okay. Well, I've already mentioned getting connected with people in your church. So I think that one's already been stated. I think one thing that has helped me be more disciplined is really using technology because I have a commute every day, 45 minutes. And so I try to use my time as wisely as I can. And that is, listening to the Bible I actually listen to the Bible recap. Can I say that on here?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, I listen to it too.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So absolutely. Okay. So I listen to the Bible recap, and those kind of little opportunities in between my commute has really built me up, and it makes me, because Christians have some guilt sometimes because we don't feel like we're doing all the things that we can do, especially when you have a church that's dependent on you. And so I've been able to use that and be able to use my time wisely in the car. And then, when I realized that, I said before, church is not what I used to think it was. And I realize now that, times like prayer is not just at an altar. A prayer is my commune with God on an everyday basis. I have to have him as my teammate in this job that I do every day. And when I started pushing aside all of those things that I thought church was and what being a Christian was, and started realizing that I can incorporate Christ and commune with God in an every moment, every day manner, where I'm either praying for someone who just sent me a prayer request on our Remind, because that's part of my church, or a family just texted me and said my child is on the way to the ER because they're having some sort of asthma thing. All of those things I can pray for them at that very moment. And I can also commune with God on a daily basis, because you know what? God said, I've called you friend. I'm going to talk to my friend every day. I'm not going to wait till I go down to the altar. I'm going to talk to him every day. And I'm not going to use all kinds of formality and these and thous. I'm going to say, God, I appreciate you giving me a good parking place today because my feet are hurting or whatever. And Lord, I don't know. I might have missed something last time I was working with this baby. Show me that. Be my hands, be my words. Let me speak whatever you want to say. Let the Holy Spirit work through me. If we could just grasp that and know that he is that kind of God that just travels with us and is part of our little bag that we take in and out of homes, or part of our everyday uniform or whatever we wear to work, that I think that's life-changing to know, to think about. He's my employer. He's also my friend. I'm going to take him with me every day.
Beautiful. I feel like that is just like a good solid like end of sentence right there. Yes. Candy, where can people find you, listen to your podcast with you and your husband, all of that good stuff?
Yeah. So Little Hens, Big Victories, it's on Apple Podcast. And we have a website that probably needs to be updated. I have a Facebook page. I don't have enough time to do all that.
All right. It's all right. And all the links will be below in the show notes as well.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Candy, thank you for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule and your day. And I hope you just like leave and go get some grandbaby snuggles.
I'm going to.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me. I loved it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And tune in next week, you guys, to listen to another episode. Leave Candy 5 stars and then go subscribe to her podcast as well. And then leave her 5 stars as well while you're at it. And we'll catch you next week.